Nvidia's GTX 980 and GTX 970, the latter's memory issues notwithstanding, are the current kings of power-efficient GPU performance. But for the vast majority of people, such pixel-pushing power is unnecessary. Enter the GTX 960, Nvidia's entry into the hotly contested mid-range market, where 1080p and a sub-$200 price tag rule. Like its bigger brothers, the GTX 960 is based on the power-sipping Maxwell architecture, this time on the smaller GM206 chip. This runs at a base clock of 1126 MHz, with a boost clock of 1178 MHz. There are 8 SSM CUDA-core clusters for a total of 1024 processors and just 32 ROPs, while the memory interface is bumped down from 256 to 128-bit with 2 GB on board. The reduced memory bandwidth will have an effect on performance, but it's offset by the use of some super fast GDDR5 memory and some nifty memory compression technology for a total bandwidth of 112 GB a second. For those building smaller systems, the real draw here is the GTX 960's excellent power efficiency. With a TDP of just 120 watts, it's entirely possible to build a full Core i7 system, overclock it, and still have a computer that pulls under a meager 250 watts under load. That's seriously impressive power efficiency. It also results in a GPU that runs very cool and thus very quiet. MSI's implementation of the GTX 960 makes use of its twin Frozer cooling system, complete with some serious looking heat pipes and hefty Torx fans. Note that unlike a blower design, MSI's implementation vents hot air into the case, so good airflow is a must. Those working with particularly small and cramped chassis will want a blower style card, not to mention something a little smaller thanks to the MSI's 26.5cm length. The benefit to all that cooling goodness, provided you have good airflow, is a card that doesn't even have to spin up its fans at idle or under light loads. And even when it's stressed, it's extremely quiet. That's another power efficiency victory for Maxwell and a win for MSI's cooler. Connectivity wise, there's just a single 8-pin power connector to hook up, along with one dual-link DVI output, one HDMI, and 3 full-size display ports. All GTX 960 support the upcoming DirectX 12, along with Nvidia's full suite of GameWorks, which you can learn about in our GTX 980 review right here. So the GTX 960's got the features, but how does it perform? Hooked up to our Core i7 3770K system with 16GB of DDR3 RAM, the card breezed through most all our 1080p benchmarks, running our test suite of games at above 60 frames per second with all the settings cranked. Naturally, the only game not to do so was perennial system breaker Crysis 3, which managed a playable but not entirely smooth 40 frames per second average. As for higher resolutions, the GTX 960 isn't the best choice, particularly as it only has 2GB of memory, but there are playable frame rates that hover above 30 frames per second to be had at 1440p. If your entire gaming life revolves around stuff like Dota, League of Legends or Counter-Strike, then naturally 1440p at well above 60 frames per second is no problem for this card. Performance is good then, but not earth-shattering in the same way as the GTX 970. That said, it is noticeably faster than the outgoing GTX 760 and uses less power, and if you're running an older 660 or 560, it's certainly worth the upgrade. AMD's offerings at the same price are very competitive though. That's especially true of the R9 280, which retails for the same $200, but actually features a 384-bit memory interface and 3GB of memory. Yes, it's based on an older architecture, but it stands toe-to-toe with the GTX 960 on performance, and the extra memory is great for those games with large textures, or if you're into modding games like Skyrim. So the GTX 960 might not be the revolution in value that the GTX 970 was, and the 2GB of memory is stingy by today's standards. But there's still no touching Nvidia when it comes to power efficiency, resulting in the coolest, quietest cards around. If you're after a capable 1080p GPU, it's a good choice for the cash, but with GPU memory requirements on the rise, I'm keen to see what AMD can come up with later this year.